Thanks for watching Numbskull News. And today we're going to get into a little bit lighter fare. Instead of all this ACC turmoil and Luka Doncic crap and all that, we're going to get a little bit lighter today. So I'm talking about the Big 12 coaching hot seat. Now, I'm going to use a tier list, and I have these symbols here, and I'm going to explain them. I did this last year, so maybe some of y'all remember from a year ago. But anyway, I'm going to give you a refresher. So the top one, the Igloo. These are coaches that I'm going to put in this area that are just, it's cold as hell. There's no hot seat. They're fine. The criteria I'm going to use, I am stealing from Locked On Big 12 with Jake Toll. He had the Double Fries No Slaw guy on, and they were doing their little coaching hot seat thing. I didn't watch the whole thing. I didn't want them to, infiltrate my thinking. But one of the criteria I'm going to steal, which is if a coach can survive a disaster season, like Florida State last year, or Oklahoma State going 9-3, 9-3, 3-9, and losing all 9 conference games. I'm talking about a complete disaster of a season, that they can survive that. If they can survive it, they go up here. The next level down, it would take a disaster season to put them on the hot seat or get them fired. That's what there's. So there's smoke. There's a little smoke, but there's no heat right now. But if a disaster season next year happens, they can very well lose their job over it. Like that seat goes into full flame mode. The next level down, this third tier, I'm going to call it the Neil Brown tier. The Neil Brown Memorial tier. 6-6 will not save their job. All right, that's what Neil Brown was this year. West Virginia got bowl eligible, but it wasn't enough to save him. What would have saved Neil Brown's job? Another 8-4 season? Probably. 9+, that's safe. So we're talking at least 8. At least a solid 8 wins. Plus, that's what it's going to take to save your job next year. So it's not about a disaster season. Anything below being one of the top schools in the Big 12 next year will get you fired. And then comes the full-on hell flame mode, hell flame tier, which, what that means is your seat is incredibly hot. You're going to have to compete for the Big 12 conference title in order to save your job. We're talking 9 or more wins. I mean, maybe an 8-win season does it. It depends on who you beat with those 8 wins. It depends on how those 4 losses come about. Were they blowouts, or were they really close? You got screwed by the ref, or some miracle play, a Hail Mary. You lost by a Hail Mary or two. That's the kind of thing that may save you as far as 8-4. But it'll take 9, 10+ wins to save your job. So, let's get going. And I'm going to start with my beloved TCU Horned Frogs. Sonny Dykes is going nowhere, even if they finish the season like Florida State 2-10. A disaster season. Some people may not believe that. I definitely do. Look, his first year, gets to the 4-team playoff, beats Michigan, gets to the national title game. The next year, 5-7. All right, just sucked. And, there was a little smoke with his name. Last year, they go 8-4. Not the best team, but in the upper half of the Big 12. And they won against some teams that they weren't favored to win. They were the underdogs, and they come up with the win. And in doing so, not just that, but found a quarterback this year in Mr. Hoover. So there's a lot of optimism in Fort Worth for TCU next year. This guy, even a disaster season, he won't be fired. Now, he'll be on a huge hot seat, but he'll still have his job. So therefore, cold as ice for Mr. Sonny Dykes. And let's go ahead and just get this one out of the way. Mike Gundy, it's the hottest seat in the Big 12. Keep in mind, he has a reduced buyout now and has taken a pay cut. So everything's set up for him to be easily discarded after the end of next season or even before if things don't go well. Maybe he saves his job with 8 wins. Maybe. Depends on who he beats. If 3 of those wins are some multi-directional JUCOs and non-conference, it's not going to get it done. He's going to have to compete. This team's going to have to rally around the coach, and really, this team's going to have to they're going to have to inspire people to keep Mike Gundy in place. So, therefore, it's a super hot seat. I don't think there's any pushback about that. Iowa State, Matt Campbell, super freaking cold. People at Iowa State are thrilled with Matt Campbell. Are you kidding me? They just played for the Big 12 title game. They got handled up, but they got there. They won Farmageddon, which was they won the right to be there. Iowa State, all right, this is going to be one of the top teams in the league next year. I don't think there's a disaster season coming, but let's say there's a rash of injuries. All right, Rocco Becht is coming back, but let's say he gets hurt and everybody else is hurt. He's starting backups, and this team goes 2-10. He'll still have his job. Oh, Coach Lance Leipold. I struggled with this one. I thought maybe put him in the smoking section. But let's be real. Kansas hasn't competed on, and there's been no expectations with Kansas for years and years until Coach Leipold showed up. So they fall again last year, but look how they ended the season on a hot streak, beating some of the best teams in the league. Even if they go 2-10 next year, I think Coach Lance keeps his job. I think, I'm not saying there's not expectations at KU. There absolutely is. However, I think there's a reality of the situation. I think they love their coach, so if disaster happens, they're going to give him another shot. He'll be in the depths of hell of a hot seat if they have that disaster season, but I think he'll have a chance even after that to rectify things. I'm going to make this real easy for K-State. They won the Big 12 a couple years ago. They were in the running late, caught a couple losses. They finished 8-4, I believe, still. A quality. And to me, I think it's ahead of schedule. They got a very young quarterback who's dynamic. Kleiman, people there in Kansas State, they believe in Kleiman. Cold as ice. That's all I got to say. Say what you want about Coach Prime. He's one of the safest coaches. One of the safest coaches in the Big 12. He has turned Colorado around. He's the biggest draw, viewership-wise, in the Big 12. Going nowhere as long as he doesn't want to go anywhere. I don't give a damn if they're 2-10 next year. He ain't going nowhere. And West Virginia and UCF, I should have just thrown them out first thing. Brand new coaches, retreads, but they're going back to their original programs. You got Rich Rod in West Virginia. You got Scott Frost in UCF. It doesn't matter what happens next year. Everyone expects a complete rebuild. So if they have a disaster season, it's kind of expected. It's kind of built in. They got a 1-year exemption, so they're colder than ice. No worries. Next up, the Utah Utes, Kyle Whittingham. I know he should be cold as ice. He was last year. But this year, that was kind of a disaster season for Utah. Before the season, they were picked to be, to win the Big 12. Nationally, everyone thought Utah was like in the lead to win the Big 12. They weren't even close. They got buried. They lost to Arizona. I mean, horrible losses. And look, I expect Utah to be back, maybe a little better next year. Kyle Whittingham, you would never think he would get fired. He's done so much for that program. I don't think he'll get fired. But let's say there's a even worse disaster season next year, because they didn't make a bowl game. Utah didn't make a freaking bowl game this year. But let's say it's a FSU type of year, 2-10. or an Oklahoma State 3-9, and they lose all 9 conference games, there's going to be a lot of talk about Witt. Like, is he past his prime? Why let him resign? We need to get him out of here now. That's the kind of talk that'll happen. I don't know if he survives a disaster season. All right, Tech fans, let's go ahead and rip this Band-Aid off. Joey McGuire is not 100% safe. Are you talking about one of the top, actually the top recruiting class last year or 2 years ago for Texas Tech? This year, they've won the transfer portal. They beat everyone's ass in the transfer portal. I'm talking not just in the Big 12, but I'm talking SEC, Big 10. They are one of the top nationally in the transfer portal. They are investing heavily in the football program. So Joey McGuire has got to put up or shut up. Look, they still had a quality year this year, but I think it's not what was expected. Next year, the expectations are through the freaking roof for this guy. If there's a disaster year, I don't know if Texas Tech is going to put up with it. They're putting so much into this thing. He's got to produce. All right. Look, he'll survive a 6-6 season. You know, that'll put him on the hot seat, but he'll survive it. A 2-10, 3-9 type of season, I don't know. There's not a lot of smoke right now. Or I would say there's a little smoke. There's no heat. But think about it. If they have an FSU or Oklahoma State type season next year, you can't consider them safe. Houston with Mr. Willie Fritz. Now, this year was his first year, and they weren't expected to be good. There's no expectations for next year. Maybe a game or two, hopefully a little better. But if there's a disaster in Houston, they're not going to get rid of Willie Fritz. They're already paying the last coach. They fired him a little bit early. So they're not trying to do that again. So for one more year, Mr. Willie Fritz, he's in the igloo, safe. Well, this one's going to be a little controversial as well. Coach Satterfield, a lot of people believe he was a bad hire. All right, a lot of people in the media, some people on X believe he was a bad hire. Cincinnati could have done better. The reason I'm saying there's some smoke with him, but there's no warmth yet. Okay? You got to think what Cincinnati has invested in him. They gave $3.5 million to Louisville, basically for restitution, to get him out of his contract early. That's $3.5 million for a school like Cincinnati. That's a lot of money. On top of paying him his coaching salary. So, and then you're having to pick up for a coach that left, and so he had to rebuild this thing. He's still rebuilding this thing. If there's a disaster season, and I'm talking that 2-win season, that horrible season, yeah, he can lose his job. But even if he doesn't make a bowl game, if he's a 5-7 coach next year, I think he's still got another year. So therefore, he's not cold, he's not perfectly safe, but I think he's a lot safer than people think he is. Well, here's another no-shit pick. Arizona State, I mean, come on. Dillingham not going anywhere. Not after what they did. Winning the Big 12, taking the Texas Longhorns to the absolute limit in the playoffs. The absolute best game of all the CFP this year. Arizona State, they could go, 0-12, and Kenny Dillingham will still have a job. Cold as ice. Some folks may find this crazy, all right, but Coach Satake, I mean, what did they finish the year? 10-2? I mean, just an amazing year. Damn near came within a butt hair of getting into the Big 12 conference game. Damn near made the playoffs this year. Coach Satake is not going anywhere. If the disaster season happens, he's safe. He is safe. He has proven he can do this at a Big 12 level. Now, Brett Brennan. This dude was on the hot seat forever. For a lot of people, he was on the hot seat as soon as he was hired. All right, forget about anything else. People wanted him fired after 1 year. Look, folks, I'm putting them here just because there's a lot of talk. Maybe I have something wrong. Uh, but this dude has a massive buyout that's not going to go anywhere. And even if you have a disaster season, a lot of people think Arizona had a disaster season last year. You still scored a Utah win. You had some decent, I don't know, one or two decent wins in there. Brent Brennan, I don't think, you know what? Here's the deal with Brett. I'm moving him up one. I done talked myself out of it. If there's a disaster season next year, if they only win one or two games or something, maybe they fire him. But think about the financial position Arizona's already in. This is a school, incredible debt. All right, this coach has a huge buyout. They're not trying, even if they completely suck nuts next year. I don't see this happening. I don't see them getting rid of him. Just because of all the noise, I got to say there's smoke. But just because of their financial situation, I almost want to put him in the igloo, saying, "Dude, you're safe for another year," just because of your contract. That's the reality of it. But just because of the noise, I'm going to put him in the smoking section, just for now. Baylor, boy, they finished hotter than hell, 8-4. They look like they got a legit quarterback. I think they're going to be one of the top teams in the Big 12. They should be one of the teams favored to win the Big 12 next year. But Dave Aranda, he better have that kind of season. This is a Neil Brown type of year. If you falter, if Baylor drops a little bit to 6-6, that could cost him his job. Forget about a disaster season. If they finish subpar, the people at Baylor are really going to think about making a move because they have defended him over 2 or 3 years of just, disappointment. Every year it got worse and more embarrassing. And then last year, Dave Aranda turned it around. If he didn't, he'd be out of there. I'm convinced he'd be fired if it turned into an Oklahoma State type of debacle, another embarrassing year. He'd be gone. But I think he pulled it out. He pulled it out with 8-4, but he better come back with another 8-4 plus season, or he's gone. So that's it, guys. That's the hot seat. And if you look at the top of this thing: TCU, Iowa State, Kansas State, Colorado, West Virginia, UCF, Houston, Arizona State, BYU. These are really solid coaches, solid programs. Some of them are rebuilding, obviously, but when you add in the smoking section, I don't think any of these coaches are getting fired next year. But if an unforeseen, just Hurricane Katrina-like event hits their program, they could be out. The Big 12's doing pretty damn well. That's all I'm saying. This is kind of impressive. There's not one dude on the hot seat, Mike Gundy. And would it shock me if he pulled out a great season next year and saves his job? It wouldn't shock me. Anyway, thanks for watching this crap, and I'll be back with some more crap later. Bye.